Welcome to NoFo Studios. Today we have Vin, Steve Mudd, and Rob Carpenter with us. And Vin, what are we going to be discussing today?
Well, today we're very fortunate to have Steve Mudd and Rob Carpenter. Rob, if you don't know, is the executive director of the Farm Bureau. And Steve Mudd, this is his 50th year in viticulture, agriculture. And he's planted vineyards up and down the coast from Massachusetts to Virginia for 50 years. So very fortunate. We're going to get into agriculture today and the sustainability of it. Steve, first I'd like to start off. Would you please tell us about yourself?
Sure. We started planting grapes in 1974. The first vineyard that got planted on Long Island was 1973. Louise and Alex Hargrave. And I was going to school in Miami for aerospace technology, and I was finishing up my last year, and my father sent me an article. It was in the Wall Street Journal about Alex and Louisa Hargrave planting a vinifera vineyard in Cutchogue. So when I came home for Christmas break in December of '73, I went with my dad to go visit Alex and Louisa Hargrave, and my dad piggybacked on a plant order that they had coming from California. So we planted, our first year we planted 1 acre, and we planted Sauvignon Blanc, we planted Merlot, we planted Gewürztraminer, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay on the first acre. And then we planted 5 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon the following year. And people are asking my dad, what are you going to do with these grapes? My father says, I have no idea. Somebody will buy them. Back then there was
Foresight.
Back then there was something called winter. Mm-hmm. You know, we used to get some really cold temperatures, particularly so upstate New York. So the style of the style of grapes that are grown primarily here on Long Island are called vinifera, and they're not very winter hardy. Cold temperatures kill them, or they really set them back drastically. So there wasn't a lot of vinifera vines, no matter what the varietal was, planted upstate New York because that got much colder than we did. Matter of fact, 1980, our 8th year, I guess, into it, or 6th year, they called it the Christmas Massacre in New York State. We had temperatures that were up into the 40s and 50s. This is in December. The vines loaded up with sap.
Oh, no.
And then we had I think a 28 or a 30 some odd degree temperature change in 48 hours. And it just devastated the vineyards. It split the trunks because they were loaded up with sap, which doesn't have any antifreeze in it. So we sold a lot of fruit. We sold fruit to the Biltmore Estate in South Carolina. I delivered grapes to Charlottesville, Virginia.
Wow.
There was no wineries on Long Island. We were growing grapes. There was no market. And then we established a couple markets upstate New York in Penn Yan that would buy everything that we raised. Then we had people coming and visiting us, such as Peter and Pat Lenz, Kip Bedell, Dan Damiamos from Pindar. I want to know if we could help them get started.
Is that the first 5 almost?
Probably, yeah. Wolfer was another one that was very early. I planted a lot of Wolfer in the 70s, late 70s. And even back then it was a pain in the neck to get back and forth to the South Fork. So I had a 21-foot boat, and I bought an old station wagon. I had a friend that lived in Sag Harbor. We left a car over there, and we commuted by boat in the 70s to the south, and it was worth it. It was really worth it.
I can imagine.
So, that's how we kind of got involved. But people would come ask us if we could help. I never really added up. I hear that we have somewhere around 3,000 acres of grapes planted total on Long Island. I'm going to say I know we probably planted half of them. So there's very few folks that we didn't work for at one point or time. And, here we are today. 51 years later, the industry's leaning, but we're still standing.
Right. Barely.
Yeah.
Rob, would you please tell us about yourself?
Sure. So I'm the current director of Long Island Farm Bureau. We're based out of Calverton. Farm Bureau was founded actually in 1911 to help the farm community in New York State do information exchange with Cornell University, which is our land-grant college here in New York. Here on Long Island, we have a tremendous, diverse agricultural industry that has really changed and evolved over the years. Going back into the 1940s and 50s, we were predominantly potatoes and cabbage and cauliflower and vegetables and fruits. But today we grow almost everything that can be grown, except for maybe delicate crops like citrus and some other unique types of varieties. People don't understand the diversity we have, which also includes a new and reforming industry, which is actually aquaculture, the cultivation of oysters in our local bays and waters around Long Island. Sugar kelp is a new industry that's coming in. Hops, with a proliferation of craft beverage industry. And we've seen a lot of shift in agriculture over the years. So it's really a changing dynamic. And if we're on the forefront of things going forward, there's exciting times ahead for our industry here on the island. So our job is to work to protect that industry and help foster it so that we'll always have some sort of agriculture here on Long Island.
You know, on another interesting note about Long Island agriculture, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, up until maybe 7, 8 years ago, it hasn't been 10. Long Island was the largest agricultural revenue earning county in New York State. I don't know if you guys realize
That's amazing.
That's a pretty bold
That is
statement.
correct.
Is that about 7, 8 years ago, maybe?
Yeah,
lost that?
actually, we are currently fourth in the state, and the new census numbers came out a few months ago. We have approximately $365 million a year in gross sales from agriculture.
Wow.
And that is the fourth largest in New York State.
That's amazing.
And the difference between 1 and 4 is only a few $1 million. So we're not that far from being number one.
That's great. Steve, in our encounters, right, to take nothing away from you, I want to say I've been very fortunate to have Steve as a mentor while I was momentarily in the wine industry. I'd like to ask you, Steve, I know you sat on a few boards as well, right? Would you tell us what boards you sat on? And
Sure. I sat on Long Island Farm Bureau Board of Directors, I think, for 16, 18 years. I worked with Rob. Rob was on there when I was on, and there was 2 executive directors before Rob. It was a wonderful experience. I mean, the people that you meet and the people that you get to meet because of the people you meet. You know, I was a head lobbyist for Long Island, for Farm Bureau, trying to get statewide values because they were hosing us on property taxes on Long Island. And at that time, it was Kumo Sr. was the governor, and Gail Schaefer was the Secretary of State, and David Call was the agricultural dean of Cornell. This is a cute story. So we're trying to get statewide values, and Dean Call, as you recall, he just had this dynamic voice. It was like E.F. Hutton talking when that man spoke. Everybody listened because his mannerism and his voice was very interesting. So we're trying to get statewide values.
could you explain to our audience what statewide values is?
It's the baseline that your taxes for agricultural land are.
Thank you.
Okay, and I don't remember exactly what we were paying, but I think we were paying like 25% above the rest of the state at that time. So I got appointed to go on a committee for statewide values, and Dean Call was there, and we were trying to make some progress. I was trying to make some progress for Long Island. I kept getting slapped down because whatever. And David Gaskell was the director of equalization assessment at that time. And he said to me, I don't even understand why anybody even farms on Long Island. Why? Why do you come up with that? Well, because, the land values are so high. Wow.
That's a great story.
That's what the man said to me. So I said to him, can I ask you a question? I would assume you live in New York State. Yeah. Well, I would assume your house is worth $100,000 or whatever it is. And he goes, oh, it's worth a lot more than that. And I said, then why don't you sell it? He goes, I don't want to. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good point. Neither do we.
That's
okay.
amazing.
And for you to have a ludicrous statement like that, because our land values are so high, we shouldn't even be farming it. It's like pretty
And
sad.
To be a top producer at that after a little persistence.
Yeah. So it got more interesting. My dad was sitting on at extensions board at Cornell at the time, and Dick McGovern was a sod grower in Huntington. And Dick McGovern, you know, guys are familiar with DeLee and Delilah.
Yep.
McGovern sod was a pretty big footprint in his day. And my dad and Dick served on this board. So I was telling my dad that I couldn't make any forward motion with this group, you know, because of some of the comments Dean Call was making. And so he goes, tell Stephen to give me a call. So I give Dick a call, and he goes, got a pen? Yeah, I want you to write something down. Yeah, well, sure. So he goes, I said, you know, he made a comment to the board that he was just on Long Island, and the farmers on Long Island have so much money that a guy that he just spent time with has a Jaguar for a lot car.
Wow.
And, okay. And he goes, that was me. And he goes, and Dean Call and I were roommates at Cornell when we were kids. So I want you to ask him, you know what? I know what to say. So I said, listen, I investigated what the comments that you made about farmers riding around in lots in Jaguars on Long Island. I never saw anybody riding around in a Jaguar, but I found that guy, and he's right. He told me he had hose, he had a wheelbarrow, everything in the trunk of his car. And he asked me to ask you, how many dairy farmers there are in the state of New York that not only have their own runway for their own airplane, but they just extended their runway on their home farm for their brand new twin-engine airplane?
Right?
And the room went silent.
Yeah.
So we have a break.
Land values.
We go out into the hall, back to land values. And Dean Call comes up and grabs my hand. And he was a pretty big dude. He's crunching. And I just said to him, break it or let it go. You know, we're here for statewide values. I got other stories. I didn't have any more. I got other stories. I want me to continue. And we got statewide values.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Persistence pays
That's
off.
awesome.
True story. So the other boards that I've served on, I was on Long Island Farm Bureau, I think, for like 18 years.
Wow.
I served on the South Old Town Ag Advisory Committee for 20 years. I served on the Suffolk County Farm Select Committee for maybe 5 years. And I was also on another county committee for 15, 20 years, all pertaining to agriculture. And kind of disheartening here in South Old Town for the Ag Advisory Committee. Way back when they were trying to change our land zoning to 5-acre zoning, which would have devastated our values, our bank
Everything you
collateral,
worked hard for.
everything we worked for. And so we did everything we could to stop it, and we stopped it. But it was a challenge. And the supervisor at that time, Bob Van Borgendien, was a chairman of that board. And I said, we need to go talk to the supervisor and just see where we're at. And so we went in to go see the supervisor, and the comment was, I don't care what you say. You serve at the board's discretion. So back
What are you there for?
what are we there for?
Right.
It's
So I remember our conversations, and I don't want to speak for you, but you gave up these seats, right? Willingly or voluntarily? Like, you tell me why, right? Well, I want to get to the why, because, and I didn't spend all this time asking about you to fill your head, because you're Steve Mudd, and I want to praise you. You're an expert viticulturist. We should be listening to people like you.
Well, I enjoyed the time that I served on every one of these committees. There's pluses and minuses to everything. Everybody knows that. But it just, case in point, at least in South Old Town, you're talking to deaf ears.
Yeah.
I don't have much time.
Why, right? I want to get to the why. And it's sad. Farmers don't have time at all. And then for you to give up your time to sit on these boards and try to make a difference, actually gain ground and then lose it just as fast, it's Rob, I want to bring it back to you. The farmers out here are asking for help. South Old Town really doesn't listen. Now, very delicately, can you, as the Farm Bureau, speak on that?
Well, I think that the farm community is under quite a bit of pressure. Most people don't realize that farmers work on pretty thin margins because of the way the agricultural system is set up. When farmers go to sell their crops, they're competing against other farmers in different states that have different economic standards, different regulations, different circumstances that allow them to produce. But equally, they're equidistant from New York City or the markets, so it's no problem for them to send in product the same as our farmers. And because of the high land values, because of New York State regulations, it becomes very difficult for our farmers to compete fairly in an unlevel playing field. So this is where we really need all towns and our public to support us in buying local and helping us.
I agree.
We have preserved here in Suffolk County approximately 23,000 acres, and that's going to be permanently preserved for agricultural production.
Fantastic.
But we always say all the preservation means nothing if we don't have the farmers to farm the land and produce the crops.
I agree.
So this is where we need to think a little more broadly about encouraging farmers to be able to farm and understand that farming comes with a unique set of challenges and unique circumstances that you don't see from, let's say, an IBM or an Apple computer. Farmers are out early, they're working hard, they're subject to Mother Nature, there's wind, there's dust, there's noise, there's irrigation. But farmers need all of that and more to be able to produce the food and the fiber that we enjoy and to give us a quality of life that is unique here on the island.
Right. So, go ahead, Steve.
I'd like
please.
to add to that. And in my occupation, I'm just a farmer. I don't make wine. I grow grapes. I sell grapes. I grow grapes for a lot of people. But I was just talking to somebody today. I ran into him getting a slice of pizza a little while ago that I hadn't seen for a while. And he's a winemaker, and he works for a local winery out here. And he told me he just came back from Greenport making sales calls, going to restaurants. And he said to me, it's so discouraging because you go in there, you're trying to sell your wine, and Yellowtail, which is a huge facility out of Australia, has a huge presence here because, you know, we can't put the fruit on the vines, the tons per acre that they can pull out of California, out of Australia. So right away we're in a very limited market.
Yes.
Okay. So which really just adds to our overall overhead costs. So, you know, Rob and I were chatting on the phone before a couple days ago, and I said to him, I'm born and raised out here, okay? I view, first of all, we've been found, and it's not just that people aren't all coming out here for the vineyards.
No.
They're out here for an array of reasons. And, you know, Doug, you're in real estate, you know that.
That's why the North Fork is so great.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
all the
It's
above.
amazing.
But we're in such an unfair market.
Yes.
So the question that I like to have put on the table is this. So, you know, all the folks that have moved out here, say in the past 15 years, whatever the number is, 20 years, you know, they moved out here for an array of reasons. First of all, it's beautiful. They moved out here because hopefully they like seeing agriculture, back to the open space that's preserved, which a lot of that is open, a lot of it may not be currently farmed for whatever reasons. So the question I have for all the folks that are enjoying what I was born into, did you move out here for, you know, the open space? Did you move out here because you see agriculture and you enjoy seeing that? Did you move out here because of the wine industry? I see the wine industry in a little bit more of in a corner, more so than other agricultural crops that are grown here on Long Island, because anybody that doesn't take advantage of all the wonderful vegetables and whatever on the farm stands is not, don't even know they're here. Right. But in the wine business, all of our costs are higher than they are anywhere else.
Yes.
Our wines are more expensive. It's reflected into that cost. So, you know, the restaurant owners, the local people, I don't want to go so much on the restaurants because I can kind of understand why they're going that direction. It's easier for them. They're guaranteed the supply. And if you're on a wine list, you come off of a wine list, you're not getting back.
And their
on.
margins are so much greater when you buy a bottle for $8 versus what we can put it out for. And presently, I think we could put a bottle of wine out $35 with corks and with screws and with labels and with boxes and with labor and with growing and with chemicals, right?
Yeah.
So how do you compete?
It's
You
tough.
can't compete.
It's tough. You can't. But
You're not buying a better. You're buying the same year, same variety, grown in two different places in the world. One is $17 on a shelf. One, when in the next couple of years, we're going to be selling that bottle for $55, and you're buying the same year, same age. You're not buying a better product for more money. You're buying the same product. What do we do?
Well, what I'm hoping to get the message out there is that I'm requesting that the folks that live out here visit some wineries and buy some local wine.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, you're buying
While
seafood.
you're out here.
You're buying the
Right.
best seafood. You're buying the great vegetables, but you're not.
The wine is good.
The liquor stores are busier than the retail places.
The
for
wine is
wineries.
good. The wine competes.
Yeah, and that's important. Okay, that's real
Right.
important.
So I'd like to remind, vast is vast. Vast is maintained by the farmer, and the farmer pays for that with the viable business model. When that viable business model no longer works, right, and it becomes unsustainable, vast grows in, and now we just have overgrown, and we don't have the original character of why we believe people moved out here. Rob, what can you say, being on the Farm Bureau, different towns do differently? Sorry, I was a little redundant there. What do towns do differently as opposed to here that actually help the industry or help sustain agriculture?
Each town is a little bit different in how they view agriculture, and there are positives and negatives in each town. I think a lot of it really depends upon who's in office at the time and who has the education and who has been out to the local farms to understand what's going on. And in many instances, the towns that are doing better are the towns that are more forgiving of farmers and their practices.
Yes.
The towns that encourage agriculture and the towns that encourage things that are on the fringe of agriculture, such as agritourism, really set the farmers up for longer term success than a town that may come in and say, nope, we don't like this particular thing, therefore we're going to outlaw it, we're going to ban it. And that just makes it harder for farmers to be able to have
Yes.
the inclusive operation
Correct.
that they really need to survive. And when we look at agriculture, we're seeing new technologies come into play. We're seeing farmers change their business model to reduce high cost inputs to do things better. And we talk about the people moving out here. Going back 4 or 5 years ago, pre-COVID, it was relatively stable. I mean, real estate was pretty good. But the minute COVID hit and people started realizing, I don't want to be in New York City, I don't want to be surrounded by people, that's when we started seeing a huge influx of people come out, buy houses here, send their kids to school here, and it's really created somewhat even of an artificial bubble in real estate. And those people came out, as Steve said, because they want to see the openness, they want the rural character. They didn't want to go into the supermarkets to buy product. They went to the farm stands. And now that things are getting back to normal, we're seeing that
Correct.
trend go back to where they're going into the supermarkets. And we're here to say, come out to the farms, continue to support our agriculture. Otherwise, this area is going to look like Nassau County at some point, and that's the last thing we want.
Well, I don't know if it's going to look. It
Well,
could look.
as
It could look
close as
like Nassau
possible.
County, but back to what Rob says, the amount of thousands and thousands of acres that are sterilized. Okay, I sold the development rights off of my farm in 1985, and nobody makes you sell your development rights. It's 100% voluntary. But people sell their development rights or they donate them. And I have to sell mine.
Yes,
I
to
have
survive.
to donate them. So, my dad had the farm that we started with, that he started with it back in the 50s. My wife and I bought 20 acres that bordered his farm to the east. And I owned that property for 10 years, and I couldn't afford to dig a hole, build a house.
Right.
Okay, so my wife and I rented, and I put my development rights up for sale, and the county purchased them. So you do get a significant tax break for that because the land is sterile.
Yes.
I think I pay maybe $30 an acre, $32 an acre for my property taxes,
Yeah.
which is the
All
same as the
helps.
rest of the state
Yes.
from a previous story,
Correct.
statewide values. But it's none of this is easy.
No.
It's exhausting.
Do we want it? The question for our community is do we want agriculture? And if you do, I really plead that we really have to start listening to what the farmers are asking for.
Okay, well, where I was going with that, you're correct in that, Vince, but where I was going with that is I've served on enough boards. There's a lot of different entities that purchase your development rights. New York State could be a purchaser. Peconic Land Trust is involved. Suffolk County's involved. Riverhead Town had their own program. South Old Town had their own program. And if it's if the resources come from multiple sources, if it's state and county or a joint thing, they have a better rapport than if it's strictly the county or the town, in my opinion.
Right.
Because the county has the jewelry to tell me that I was paid to farm. And when I heard that comment, I said, whoa, I didn't know that. Who do I send that bill to?
Yeah.
I was paid to farm? No, you bought the development rights on my property.
Right.
They have a deed language, they have a sentence in the deed language of everybody's development rights deeds. And I don't know exactly how far this goes back. I sold my development rights in '85, I think, and it was in there, and it says or as amended. And the definition of or as amended is whoever the legislative body is at that time.
Right.
So I've had, according to the county attorney, at least the county attorney that represented the development rights program for the county, I asked him, since 1985, how many amendments has there been to my deed? If we're going to do a generic year by year, how many amendments has there been on my deed? And he goes, well, I don't know exactly. I don't expect you to know exactly, but is it 1?
Right.
Is it 100? What is it? Guessing, it's probably been about 15. So you've made 15 amendments to my deed language
Right.
without sending me a copy?
Correct.
I'm not a lawyer, but I'll see you in court.
That's terrible.
You can't do that. You think you can, but that's not legal, okay? But my point is this. I was told by the county, if I don't farm my farm, and Rob's heard this too, I'm going to be fined. They're going to fine me.
Right.
I say, bring what you got.
Right.
I'll see you in court,
Right.
okay? You can say that, but good luck trying to collect it.
It's
So-
intimidating.
Look, I was paid for my development rights. They paid me X amount of dollars to sterilize my land that I couldn't build on it. I put a period after that. They put a comma.
Yeah.
And they added 16 more paragraphs. So
Where is that fair?
back to, my point is this. If agriculture cannot continue to be monetarily successful, you can't continue to farm.
Correct.
And if the county or the town, because the South Old Town has the same, or is amended in their deed language, if they think you're going to come find me because if I can't use a black pen, you're not going to make me farm.
Right.
So back to the amount of acreage that's sterilized. What I don't know, Rob, maybe you can answer this. Out of, what was it, 20?
About 23,000.
Now that's all of Long Island?
All of Long Island.
Okay. Can you pull a number out of how many of that is farmed? What percentage? What percentage of it's farmed?
I'd still say
versus open space is where I'm going.
Well,
Right.
there's two programs. So you do have the county development rights program and a separate open space program.
I understand.
But of the farmland that's preserved, I think for the moment we're in pretty good shape that the majority is
90%?
being farmed. I'd say 90 to 95% pretty
decent.
easily.
Yeah.
But easily that number could switch and it could go to 60%.
Right. Yeah,
Depending
well, 3
upon
farms just went out of business this year.
depending upon economics and what farmers are and are not allowed to be able to do. And I think that's the key point that we're here to really impress upon.
I'd like to go into the comprehensive plan. First of all, I'd like to say that I am a as of right proponent. I'm all for as of right. If you purchase that land with the ability to do X, Y, and Z, you should be able to do X, Y, and Z. Let's get that out, right? So the comprehensive plan now kind of contradicts the language in these development right easements, and we kind of need an answer to that, right? Because I feel we should adopt a comprehensive plan. I'd like to leave it to both of you to say why or why not.
You're talking South Old Town?
South Old Town, comprehensive plan.
Well, I don't even know when's the last time. I don't know when the last date was put on the comprehensive
Fair.
plan that you're talking about. Do you?
No,
Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the 2010 update was passed,
Adopted, yes.
adopted in like 2020.
Right.
I mean, it took a long
So-
time for that process to happen.
I want to say, are there some things outdated or does not apply? Possibly, but
yeah,
I want to
always.
say for my circumstance where I would have appreciated that they did adopt a comprehensive plan, it applied to a U-pick operation, whereas you could park cars on development rights sold land according to the comprehensive plan. Now, according to the easement where the rights were sold, you can't. So I'm a as of right type of guy, but why did we do the comprehensive plan?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, back to the parking thing. I was involved with another retail winery, and the town should do a little bit more research on how many parking spots are mandated.
Correct.
Okay, every place. It's called growing pains, guys.
We have
It's a
to
good
expand.
bitch,
We have to
okay?
adapt.
If you got growing pains, you got to kind of make some adjustments. You're not going down. You're growing up, and you're running out of room for cars. So, so I came up with this idea we got some parking here. So the town came and told them you can't do that, and they also were told, this is Southwold Town again. Employees can park on DRS, but customers can't.
What's
So
the difference?
show me that. Where's that printed?
Where's the difference, though?
Where,
You want to create things, that's great, but create things that make sense. What's the difference? Is it the oil that drips from the car? But I've seen some tractors out here that leak like a sieve. What's the difference, right?
I don't know. It's kind of confusing. Okay.
I-
It's just another. It's a bigger bite that government needs not to take. My opinion. Okay.
I don't want to completely, I want to say Southold Town, they're listening to a certain percentage of their voters.
Yeah.
Right? They are, and they can, and that's great. I appeal to those voters to just please listen to what our farmers are asking for, and maybe the town would come around to allowing farmers to farm, allowing farmers to bring the value added with processing, with room for refrigeration. Because if we get into development rights, what was sold, right? What did the farmers sell when they sold those development rights? Yeah, the ability to build a house, we understand that. But did they sell the ability to evolve, to actually that would thwart and put them in the unsustainable category? But we can't allow that, right? Can we come together as a town to at least let farmers farm? Let's not give people with development rights intact excuses to put foundations in the ground. We said that in a previous episode. We need to allow our farmers to farm.
Right. You sold development rights. You didn't sell the soul of the land. That's what it feels like.
But it's not fair.
No.
But what transpires, I think, is kind of what leads it off this conversation. The voters. Okay. Most of the folks I'm talking about are the people that have moved out to this beautiful place in the past 5 years or whatever. And that wasn't just all COVID. But the elected officials listen to the voters.
Yes.
And there's no large base of voters that are farming. So it's like the hotel that went into Southold, whoever that guy was trying to put that in, I don't know, 5-7 years or
10.
what have you.
10 years.
Yeah. And it was zoned for that. Okay.
Yeah, as of right.
Yeah. Way back when, I belonged to a group called the Southold Town Businesses Association, another board I sat on, which was a really pretty good group. Dr. Lazuski started that. He was a dentist in Cutchogue. Because of all the red tape, not just agriculture. You go to the town hall to try to get something done. It's like the town of no.
Yes.
Okay, come back in 5 years maybe, but don't bring any applications. But it comes down to listening to the voters.
Yeah.
Okay, how many times the supervisor, it was in Southold Town, Scott Russell, who I knew when he was an assessor. He was a supervisor for 20 plus years. Did a pretty fair job, but he just didn't listen to anything other than what he didn't want to hear. And his rebuttal was, vote me out.
Yeah.
I tried.
Yeah.
But he got back in and got back in and got back in. He was just too difficult, all right? It just...
But I attest, are there that many voters out in Southold that are opposed to agriculture because they really haven't heard it. The farmers really haven't spoken out to the community. I kind of want to offer that platform to at least let's understand what's the total impact of the decisions we're making today. What if we lose agriculture? We do lose the community and the character of our community.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think too, going back when the first farmland program was initiated back in the 1970s.
73.
Yes, and the first land sale was 77, which was the Talmadge piece in Riverhead.
Hargrave was one of the first ones.
And Hargrave back in the late 70s. The local people knew about agriculture. It wasn't uncommon for neighbors and friends to be related to a farmer. So they understood what was going on.
Fair point.
You had people growing, potatoes was a huge
hard.
crop out here. Vegetables, all the fields were planted, and it was a locals community. And as times evolved, we had a lot of people move from other areas out here for all
Land
obvious
values.
reasons. And agriculture also changed.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, potatoes was the big crop as well as cabbage. Today, horticulture, greenhouses, vineyards, you're seeing a lot of different unique crops, and the technology is changing. And I think as people get further and further away from agriculture, they don't understand what it takes and how hard it is to actually be a farmer.
Right.
And that education piece is so hard when you only have people's attention for 2 or 3 minutes.
Right.
And so as we go forward in the future, I mean, let's think about this. In 1977, whoever thought that nursery would be the biggest crop on Long Island,
Right.
the planting of trees and the greens industry? We had no idea.
Right.
But think
But
about
it is a crop that will pay the bills.
it is. But think about it. What is it going to be in 40 years? If I knew the answer to that,
Right.
I'd be a multi-billionaire by now. But nobody knows. So how do we adapt, preserve land, adapt agricultural operations, adapt zoning codes, adapt regulations to allow for the success of agriculture? And that's something where all towns, all residents need to keep an open mind. It's not going to be like it ever was again in 1977.
No.
So what do we need to do in the future to keep the North Fork as a rural place
Right.
that everybody loves and that everybody can enjoy, and we can have economic success and viability? And that's part of the plea to the public and to the elected officials to say, hey, let's be open-minded. Let's figure this out together instead of just coming in with the answer always being no. Let's sit down and say, okay, where are we going? How do we need to get there? Let's figure this out. And that I think we need more of in all towns.
Rob, you're a tremendous asset to the Farm Bureau. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I really thank you for your time. Steve, I really appreciate the time I've gotten to know you. You've been an excellent friend and mentor and professor.
Same with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Doug,
You bet.
thank you again for having us on.
My pleasure, boys.